Welcome to another Boost Your Skills drawing lesson. Today we'll work through some drills for improving your shading skills, and we'll finish with a fun shading based project. Do these exercises in your sketchbook, and remember, it's not about how good they look, it's about just doing the practice. For materials, you need your sketchbook, you'll need a pencil. I'm using an HB pencil. Later on, you might want something a little bit darker, so I've got this 4B pencil here, or a 2B pencil would do as well. I've got a putty eraser that we may need to use, hopefully not too much. We're focusing on shading skills. We'll be practicing your light and your dark shading skills, the pressure of our pencil on the paper, and we'll also be practicing creating a 3D illusion. Start by sketching out a long rectangle. And we're going to shade across this rectangle from light to dark. Now you can't see my hand here, but I'm holding the pencil quite far back and I'm just very lightly balancing the pencil on the page and shifting it from side to side, trying to keep an even movement that stays within the rectangle. Now, as we go through the 3 drills for this lesson, make sure you pause the video when you need to and complete each exercise before moving on to the next one. That way you'll be completely prepared to tackle the project at the end of this lesson. So I've gone once across this. Now choose either side of the rectangle and you're going to push down a little bit harder to get a nice dark mark. And you'll find that to do this, you have to move your fingers further up the pencil. So we're going to create a gradation from dark to light. So as I move back across the rectangle, I want to lighten up my shading marks. And this means I'm going to probably have to change the grip of my pencil and move my fingers further towards the back of the pencil. Now I want to create a nice smooth gradation, one where you can't see any strong division between the dark and the light areas. So I'm going to have to go back over just a little bit and tidy some of these up, using a pressure that creates the value that I want to fit in between the light and dark areas. This time we're going to see if we can do it in one go. So start with a very dark value, pushing down quite hard, and then start to lighten it up and see if you need to change your grip. See how I get to a certain point across the rectangle, and then I need to change my grip a little bit just so that I can get a lighter touch of pencil on the paper. So I'm not pushing too hard. Don't worry if you've got some white spaces between your lines, but generally we're trying to get a gradation between light and dark. Moving on, we're going to sketch a zigzag line across our page using a ghosting method where we are testing the direction of the line a few times before confidently putting down the final line. If you need to, you can plot some points to measure the spacing between your lines and the angles of your lines, but see if you can draw it without putting in dots first. Then we're going to try and replicate the same line underneath it. So you're looking at the line above, using your eye to measure the angle of the line that you need to make and how long it should be. And then we're going to draw a straight line between the peaks. So we have done something like this in the straight line video. We're going to do something a little bit different with it shortly. So you see with my one, some of the lines are a little bit crooked, and that's showing where I haven't accurately measured the distance or the length of the line, and that's okay. Now we're going to go across what we've drawn, and we're going to alternate between shading a light value and then shading a dark value. And again, notice how you need to hold your pencil to get a light value and a dark value. It should change a little bit. So you either need to tilt your pencil a little bit more to get a lighter mark so that there's more of an angle on the page. Maybe you need to hold your pencil a little bit further back. Really just using my fingers here to create the shading movement because it is quite a small area that we're covering. But I'm trying to go from top to bottom of that shape rather than doing it in patches, creating a swift movement up and down and a nice rhythm back and forth. We want each one of these light shapes to be the same value and each one of these dark shapes to be the same value. So as you go along, look back at the ones that you've already done and try and match the value. This might mean going over the shapes a couple of times, shading in one direction and then maybe shading back over in the opposite direction. And you could tidy up the top and the bottom edges if you need to. With this light square, I'm trying to keep it the same value as the light one before it, or as all of the light ones before it. And this might mean if I go too dark with one, that I need to go back to one of the previous ones and just darken it up slightly so all the light values match. You can do the darker value shapes in a couple of layers. It's easier to build up a darker value with 2 layers than it is to get a nice even flat coat with one pass. I'm matching the angle of my shading with the edges of the shape that I'm shading. So this one, which is a little bit wonky, the sides aren't parallel. I'm changing my shading direction slightly as I come across. Pay attention to how you're holding your pencil. What's the best way to get a light mark and a dark shading mark? Now it's going to depend a little bit on your pencil grade, but the shading is determined by how much pressure you put down on the page. And that can be controlled by how you hold your pencil. Once you've gotten to the end of what's now like a concertina booklet, so we're creating a little bit of a 3D effect with our light and our dark values, go through and even them out. So all of the light values should be the same, all of the dark values should be the same. If you're shading over top of a light value again, you've got to make sure you have just the lightest amount of pressure. And you can see how far back I'm holding my pencil to just very lightly brush the paper and add a tiny bit more value. Don't worry if your shading marks have gone out of the lines a little bit. That's not what this is about. We are trying to control the length of that shading mark as we go, but it's not about having a perfect final product. It's more about practicing that movement. And if you want to, you could tidy up the edges a little bit with an eraser. We've done some straight lines. Now we're going to move back to curved lines, which is what we did in our last Drills for Skills video. Drawing a curve at the top and a curve at the bottom. We want them to be exactly the same. If you did watch that video, you remember there are several ways that we can draw curves. We can use short light lines to join them together, or maybe you can just get a rhythm going. So swinging your hand back and forth or moving your pencil back and forth with your fingers. Then we're going to join those curves with 2 parallel lines. Repeat the same shape 2 more times, alternating between eyebrow-shaped curves and smile-shaped curves. We're going to fill these shapes with some shading. So this first one, I'm going to shade my light value that I did in the previous exercise just above. Try to get a rhythm going with your pencil, keeping the same amount of pressure so the value doesn't change. And then you can come back over what you've done, even lighter pressure on the second layer. We're just tidying up any little gaps. And repeat this for the next one. We've done 2 light values. Now we're going to do 2 dark values. So this is where you might need some patience. Remember, we are practicing valuable skills here. It might not seem like it because we're just shading in these silly little shapes. But if you can't shade in these shapes and control the pressure of your pencil, you're going to have real trouble when it comes to an actual drawing that you want to do well with. We've done 2 light shapes, we're doing 2 dark shapes. I'm trying to move my pencil from one side of the shape to the other. But you can do it in small pieces if you're finding that difficult. So here I'm patching together little bits of shading. When you do it this way, you actually need to have more control of the pressure of your pencil because you need to match what you've already put down. And you can see it's a little bit patchy if you can't control that pressure. And when I go back over this on the darker layer, I'm trying to keep that even pressure going from top to bottom of the shape so that I get a flatter layer of shading. We're not using any kind of blending stumps or anything in this one, so it's really down to controlling the pressure of your pencil. Simple skills, but so important and often overlooked because people want to get into the really fun stuff. A couple more of these shapes to do. We're going to do them in a slightly different way to create a bit more of a 3D illusion, and then we're going to move on to a project that is a bit more fun. So start with your eyebrow curves and then another shape using smile curves, join the sides together. These ones we're going to create a gradation of shading. A gradation is where the value changes smoothly from one value to another. You can't see a line in between them. So I'm putting down a light layer first. Remember, you can hold your pencil quite far back to get a lighter mark. For this one, you're going to have a dark value on each side and a light value in the middle, and we want to blend them so that they join seamlessly. As I shade from the side towards the center, I have to lessen the pressure of the pencil. And you'll be doing this in one direction, and then you'll be moving to the other side and doing it in a different direction, moving from left to right or right to left. So one side is going to feel more comfortable for you. We're going to build this up with layers. This is the third layer, and this is the one I'm being very careful of, going as dark as I can with that pencil. So a black or a dark grey on the edges. I could use a 4B pencil for that if I need to. A 2B or a 4B pencil would be fine. The darker the pencil, the less pressure you want to use as you move towards that lighter area. And then I'm going to go back to my HB and just tidy things up a little bit. Don't want any little lines in there. So what pressure do you need to apply to be able to fill in those little white gaps? We can tidy up the top and the bottom edges. Try to keep that edge line light in the center though. It can be darker at the sides. So even the line can have value, dark or light. So this one is going to be the opposite of the one that we've just done. I want it to be light at the edges and dark in the center. But we're still aiming for a gradation, a smooth change between light and dark. Start with one layer across the whole shape using light pressure. Once you've filled in the whole shape, start at the center and put down a darker layer. It's not the darkest yet, it's just putting down something a bit darker. We're going to build this up in several layers again. And once you've got that center dark area in, then we want to start to blend it into the light areas on either side. So anywhere you see a dividing line, see if you can soften that off using just the pressure of your pencil on the page. As you move towards the lighter area, you're going to lessen the pressure of your pencil. When you're doing this, you may not be moving from the top to the bottom of the shape. You may just be doing little patches. I call it feathering. You're just feathering your shading out a little bit into a layer beneath it. Again, we're having to move in two directions, from the dark to the lighter side on the right and the dark center to the lighter side on the left. And again, one of these will feel easier for you. One of them will feel more difficult. Try not to tighten up too much with your fingers on the pencil. Keep your hand nice and relaxed. Cleaned up the top and the bottom edge of the shape with a sharp pencil line. Remember to match your edge lines to your shading values. And then I'm coming in with my darker pencil. I'd suggest a 2B pencil. I'm using a 4B just because it's what I had on hand. Darkening up that center and barely putting any pressure on the paper as I move that value out towards the light area so that it disappears. Be careful that you don't shade over your light area with your dark value. We want to blend into it. We don't want to lose it. If you've got any divides between the light and the dark, you'll need to work over those with some very light shading. Feather them out from the dark to the light, and it's good to switch back to a lighter pencil to do this. So I'm switching back to my HB pencil and just feathering out or blending out any of those dark areas into the light areas. If you want to tidy these up with an eraser, you can, but remember they don't have to be perfect. I'd rather you be moving out of your comfort zone by trying these exercises with honesty and authenticity than trying to create a perfect rendition. So notice these two, when we use the light and the dark gradient, we create a visual illusion that the shape is curving up or down, depending on whether the light is hitting the top or whether the light is hitting the inner sides of that shape. Think about these exercises we've done and see if you can identify which one has been the most challenging for you. And make a note to practice it again in your own time. Now it's time to move on to our shading project. This is a fun drawing which will help to show how light and dark shading and gradations can create a 3D illusion. We're going to use the skills that we've been practicing to draw a realistic looking hair braid. Draw two vertical lines parallel to each other. Don't worry if they're a little bit messy. Hopefully you're okay at drawing straight lines after you've done the straight line exercise video. To help draw straight lines, you can place a dot at the top and the bottom of where you want each line to go before drawing them in. And these are just guidelines, so don't worry if they're a little bit messy. And then we're going to draw a zigzag line down the center of these two parallel lines. Try and keep each line the same length, angling down to the left and then angling down to the right. This should create a right angle. Use ghosting to check the movement of your pencil before you commit to the line so you can make sure that you're drawing it on the correct angle. And then from here, you're going to join the lines angling up to the left vertical line. And then the lines angling to the right. Continue the same angle and join them up to the vertical line on the right. Before we start putting in some shading, we're going to add some curves to these outer edges. So you can see how they start at the one above them, and it's just a very shallow curve that comes outside that vertical line and then joins into the angle below it. Do this on both sides. You can use short light lines if you need to figure out that curve, and continue this all the way down. From here, we're going to shade from light to dark on each one, from light to dark. So start light on the outside and they get dark as you come in towards the center. Start with one light layer and then come in towards the center here, and from the center start dark and then fade it out as you move outwards. You can use an eraser to get rid of your vertical lines now if you want to. So remember, we're shading light on the outside and darker in the center. Start with a light layer first and then build up your darker value, blending it into the light. And fill in any little gaps. In this one, we do want to be a little bit more careful than in our exercises. You should have a smooth gradation from light to dark. If you find that you're getting too many linear marks, then do a couple of very light coats first. Move in one direction and then move in the opposite direction. We're going to fill in the whole braid this way. So keep working in your own time as I'm talking. Remember, when you want to shade darker, you can help apply more pressure to the paper by holding your pencil closer to the tip. When you're applying those darker values, start tentatively, see what kind of value you're getting first, and then maybe adjust your pencil hold to adjust the pressure of your pencil on the paper if you need to go darker or lighter. Try to tidy these ones up if you can. What we're going to do once we've shaded everything, we're going to put in some of these linear marks to create some of the hair texture. But for now, just carry on shading each one of those shapes. This is just to show you how the effect works. But it's more important to get all of your shading down evenly first. We may need to add some darker parts before we put in the hair texture. If you want to do your shading in pieces, you can do that. Remember, if you've got any linear kind of marks like this, you can move in the opposite direction to fill those in. You don't need a whole lot of fancy pencils for this one. I'm just using an HB pencil and then bringing in a softer pencil like a 2B or a 4B when I need some very dark values. Make sure you've got those nice smooth gradations happening. So anywhere where you can see a clear divide between the light and the dark. Use your pencil very lightly over top of that divide, feathering the dark area into the light area. So here you can quite clearly see a divide between the light and the dark. If you have any areas like that, work over them very lightly with an HB pencil to blend the dark into the light areas. You really need to control the pressure of your pencil. And once you've got some of these segments down, you can go back over and darken up the darker areas. Make sure your drawing has a full range of values from very dark grey or even black through to very light grey. So this one here, I can definitely afford to go darker. The greater the range between your light and your darks, the greater the depth and the better the illusion of 3 dimensions. I'm going to speed up this part here, but I recommend that you pause the video, keep working on your project, filling in every one of these shapes from dark to light and focusing on the way you're using your pencil, giving yourself this valuable practice time to improve your shading skills. When you've got everything shaded in, go back over and balance out your values. Make sure there's no little gaps that are disrupting the illusion, no gaps of white in a dark area. And you could add in a little bit more value if you want to as well, go a little bit darker. And then down the bottom here, if you want to turn this into a braid, and you don't have to, we could add a hair tie down here. And then we can use the curved lines that we practiced in the previous Drills for Skills video to add in the bottom of the braid. I'm running out of room on my page, and it doesn't matter. You can go extend outside the page if you want to. Add in a flat layer of light shading, and then add some darker shading just underneath the hair tie and then also at the very bottom point. Use an eraser to tidy up your drawing and get rid of any lines you don't want. And now we're going to add in some texture marks for the hair. So starting from the darkest part, you're going to flick upwards, and then you can also put a few texture marks right at the top of each segment where the hair would be curving around the back and under. Make sure you're following that gentle curve that we put in on either side of the plait. I hope you're getting a good sense of depth here and creating that 3D illusion. If you feel like it's not quite there, go through and darken up your darkest values a little bit. You want a full range of values from very, very dark to very light. If you're adding in some darker values, do make sure that you blend those into the layers underneath. So we need that nice smooth gradation to create that gentle curve outwards of each segment of hair. If you need to, you can come back to your HB pencil to blend the dark areas into the lighter areas. If you've drawn the bottom part of the braid where the hair is coming out of the hair tie, add in some hair texture marks at the top and the bottom, making sure you're following the curve outwards. This movement is a little bit like the fluid movement we used in the Drills for Skills on curves, but it's got a bit more of a flick to it at the end as well, so that line is a very fine point. There's one last thing you can do if you want to just boost that illusion. To create a 3D illusion, we need a full range of values from white through to black. We don't have any white here, so you could use a putty eraser just to very lightly bring out a little bit of a highlight on each segment of the braid, just through the center. As you can see, I've just put a very small amount of highlight in the center of each one, following the line of the texture that we used. Make sure you don't overdo it because we don't want to lose all of that lovely shading that you've done. And if you prefer to not erase anything, then you don't have to if you think you've got a good illusion going. Sometimes just that little tiny bit of highlight or a little bit of white in a drawing can really extend the value range. I hope you enjoyed this lesson and putting these skills to the test at the end, and I hope that you've got a good result. Thanks for joining me in this video. Now don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and then hit that little bell button so that you can get notified for the next Boost Your Drawing Skills video.